As the introduction said, I travel extensively with my job, so when this opportunity came up to finally give a presentation in Ireland, I absolutely jumped at it. So it's great to get a chance to present before this audience. Just to give a little bit of a background to myself, so originally from Cork, initially, as was introduced, I started my career in IT. Joined Apple, which is kind of giving my age away a little bit, just when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, which was a really exciting time for the company. So I went through a very kind of fast-track environment, developing software for a lot of their key products, which was a really innovative environment. I then went on to set up my own company, which was established for a number of years, looking at particularly cybersecurity and network development. In 2007, I had the opportunity to join Rockwell, where I look at more the OT side of the business. And why I'm mentioning this is, when you look at, what Rockwell call the Connected Enterprise, our strategic, manufacturing in the industry, one of the big challenges we see is how OT and IT can be brought together. So having the background in IT and now with OT, I feel sometimes like a bit of a peacemaker at a lot of these kind of customer meetings that I sit at to really try and bring both sides together to as I say, enable smart manufacturing. So what I want to do today, throughout the presentation, I'll give a quick introduction in terms of some of the industry trends and challenges, because for me, in my role, I suppose, as leading our life science industry across Europe, Middle East and Africa, one of the great things about the role is I get to talk with a lot of customers, I get to talk with a lot of manufacturers, and really, I suppose, see what's driving their business, what's driving their challenges, and how technology that we can bring as a company and as an industry, can bring support and really address some of those challenges that they're having. So when we look at the life science industry, there's a number of macro trends, external and internal trends to their business that are really having an effect. So when you look at the growth in population, by 2030, we're going to go from a population currently of about 6.5 billion people to 8 billion people globally. So when you think of the number of additional people that requires medical care, medicines and treatments, that's an incredible growth over just a little over 10 years. Combined with that we're aging we're aging as a population. We're getting older. People are living longer. That also means that our supply chain, what we're supplying in terms of medicine, we have to be able to meet those demands on supply. But also that introduces workforce challenges. So when we look at our workforce, it is an aging workforce in the industry. By 2025. We're going to lose roughly about 3.5 million people out of the manufacturing process across Europe. To counter that, we're going to bring in about 1.5 million people, which leaves a deficit of about 2 million people from a manufacturing and technical capacity in the industry. So when we look at technical enablers, that really is critical to help address some of these challenges. Combined with that, from an external factor, we're looking at technology enablers, which I cover later on in the presentation. A lot of technology is coming now on stream in terms of virtual augmented reality, digital twins. You'll see a lot of that technology, which as I say, I'll talk a little bit about later on, and how that enables smart manufacturing in the industry. Also, in terms of the industry trends, we're seeing the pace of medical breakthroughs. We're seeing a lot of, I think, investment in cell and gene therapies. Which are basically, leading us down the road towards more personalized medicines, more personalized treatments for our patients. And also from an internal perspective, the average age of the industrial equipment across our plant infrastructure is over 20 years. And when we look at, Industry 4.0, and the challenges that brings from cybersecurity, the more we connect our devices, these legacy plants and this legacy equipment that was installed those years ago, very little attention went to actually, what does it mean from a cybersecurity perspective? It wasn't so relevant back then. So when companies and manufacturers are now trying to implement smart manufacturing, trying to connect their plants, they are opening themselves up to more dangers around cybersecurity. And really in 2017, we kind of saw that come to a pass in terms of the NotPetya attack that came from a malware side. So that really was, the Russian government effectively trying to attack the Ukraine. And it wasn't a very targeted approach, which we've seen in the past from Russia on the Ukraine. This was much more of a general attack. But unfortunately, it was a malware that propagated quite extensively and actually brought down a lot of global manufacturers. So, I know in the news it was broadly shared. The likes of Mondelez, Maersk, the big shipping company, had a fierce impact on their business. And one of the considerations that manufacturers now have to bring is, from a cybersecurity perspective, it was in the news in the last week or two that actually Zurich, the insurer, have refused to pay out on Mondelez's claim from the cybersecurity attack because they're saying it was an act of war. So, in terms of even how our insurance and how we protect ourselves as manufacturers, it all has to be considered. So, when we look at those trends, well, how is it impacting our life science manufacturers? So, manufacturers are trying to bring improvements from an R&D perspective and trying to bring efficiencies to their clinical trial process. So when we look at the manufacturer, specifically at R&D, companies in life science spend on average between 20-25% of their overall turnover in R&D. So, we're helping and supporting customers use, as I say, technology to try and streamline that process. And we look at things like artificial intelligence in the drug discovery phase, which we'll talk a little bit about later on, in terms of actually analyzing, products that are in clinical trials, which are the most likely, what I'll call, products to bet on, in terms of what they submit. Technology and artificial intelligence is being used there to really help support the selection of those products. Companies are using technology to really drive improvements around their process understanding. So how can they make process improvements? How can they maximize what they're producing out of their supply chain? Also, there's an increasingly flexible manufacturing requirement and capabilities, because when we look at things like personalized medicines, that's driving much smaller batch sizes. So facilities need to be highly flexible to be able to manufacture in this environment, and how can they use, as I say, technology to help support that. Also improving the environment around how their operators are interacting with their equipment and so on. So Industry 4.0, it's, as my previous speaker said, it's been around for a number of years now. It's nothing new. But I suppose the technology that's coming to enable Industry 4.0 is constantly evolving. So, when we look at, what's really driving the pace here, it's really the cost of technology, the cost of, putting things like smart sensors on equipment, is enabling more connectivity of devices across plants, across a facility, and so on and so forth. So, manufacturers are now putting smart sensors on equipment as lowly prices, about €100. So it gives the idea that you can censor, you can bring more contextualized information, more context about what's happening in your process on relatively cheap equipment now. So it's leading to far more connectivity across the plant. So it was actually, and I don't know how well this reads on the screen, a customer of mine, not an Irish customer, actually sent me this, Belgian customer actually in the last week, and really it was a kind of a pushback on kind of sales, because when you look at, I suppose, IoT Industry 4.0, we see an awful lot of suppliers come with a product, right? Here's a product that's actually going to support your vision. This is what it's going to deliver for you. And as I explained to companies and to manufacturers across the region, it's not a product, right? Industry 4.0, leading yourself to smart manufacturing, it's a journey. It takes a number of years. It takes consistent investment. A product won't do this. It's a combination of products, of knowledge, of services that actually lead us to that journey. So one of, I suppose, the things that customers are telling me across Europe is, where do we start? Where do we start on the journey towards smart manufacturing? We hear an awful lot of terms thrown at us. So, things like artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, digital transformation, which one should we use in our process? We really don't know where to start. And, that's one challenge that we see from an implementation or an enabler in terms of smart manufacturing. But also, really, the key to success in smart manufacturing is also, it comes from an enterprise, it comes from an organizational perspective, and it comes from a cultural perspective. So where smart manufacturing and where we've seen it as a company succeed is when it's driven from a high level, so CEO downwards, but it needs to be adopted as a way of working across a complete organization. Or otherwise what you end up is, you do a series of pilots or proof of concepts to solve a particular problem, but you can't scale it outside of that. So it doesn't scale across the enterprise. You're not unlocking the real value of what you should be able to see. So there's some of the types of roadblocks that we see. So how are Rockwell supporting the journey and supporting our customers? So as I say, we look at it in terms of more of a consultancy role. So what we need to do first of all is we sit with our customer, because every manufacturer is slightly different. We look at, from a technology perspective, what have they currently got inside in their plants? From a networks perspective, how are their facilities networked? Are they capable of supporting a lot of investment in new technology? Is it secure from both a cyber and manufacturing perspective? What are the operational pain points? So don't go in with a whole lot of different technology. Look at exactly what they're trying to achieve as an organization, and basically map out with them what technologies we feel will bring the best benefit to their organization. So, we literally go in at the start. It's kind of in a discovery workshop type environment. Typically in these, with our customers, it's quite a C-level audience that we're in front of, really trying to map out what are they trying to deliver as an organization. We then work through, from a technology perspective, from an architectural design perspective, and come up then with how do we execute projects, how do we implement projects that will enable smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0, and then basically provide continuous services and support to these companies. Because as I said, it's not a specific proof of concept or a pilot. Sure, that's where we start to show a return on investment, to get further investment and further growth, but it's a continuous process. And as I say, as you start to unlock value from the information, it's a continuous process of improvement and technology application. So what I wanted to do here was share, Rockwell as a company, and we work with an awful lot of companies down this route of enabling smart manufacturing, but because of NDAs and so on, we can't share a lot of what we do with our customers. But Rockwell as an organization, we've also been down this road, right? We started our journey just over 10 years ago in 2008 of trying to deliver smart manufacturing internally. So what I'll do over the next couple of slides is really just give a little bit more information about how Rockwell applied technologies to our own, as I say, to our own company, our own manufacturing processes to enable it. So when you look at us as an organization, we have 20 manufacturing plants. We're present in over 80 countries, but we have 20 manufacturing plants. And when we started this journey back in 2004 originally, what we found was that a lot of our manufacturing plants, and a lot of the different disciplines and engineering groups inside in our facilities, they were trying to drive continuous improvement, yeah, for sure. But it was all in isolation. No departments were talking with one another, or plants weren't networked, so we had no visibility of what was going on in different facilities around the world. It was very much a kind of a siloed mentality at individual facilities. So what we need to do there originally was address some of the productivity challenges that we were having, and that involved bringing in an ERP, a CRM system, SAP, and really that enabled us then to start what we call our Connected Enterprise journey in 2008. And basically what that involved initially was, looking at how our plants were manufacturing, enabling them, giving them the network backbone to allow equipment be basically taken from plants. So basically facilities that were manufacturing similar products. We could see why some facilities were producing better than others, and even down to line level, why individual lines, why individual shifts of operators, there was discrepancies in terms of how they were performing. And basically, as I say, that's a journey that's been ongoing over the last almost 10 years. in the last 2 years, we've started to bring things like advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, really trying to drive at the supply chain optimization piece. We've now pretty much nailed down internally from a manufacturing perspective, how we could be, as I say, more efficient there. But now what we want to do is streamline our supply chain, make that more efficient for both our customers and ourselves in terms of bringing in things like raw ingredients and so on. So using artificial intelligence, using analytics there in terms of, things like, working shift patterns, seeing when customers are likely to require products, and so on and so forth. So really it's a full journey right through the process. And when we began, as I say, this journey, one of the things that struck us early on when we looked at how we were trying to manufacture was, there was no problem with data. We had loads of data, right? We were data rich, but we were insight poor. So we had very little information, usable information from all that data. So basically that was one of the biggest shifts in mindset, was how could we unlock the value that's held in that information. And to throw some kind of hard facts in terms of what we've delivered over the last number of years from this is, as I say, presented by our CEO at Rockwell in terms of efficiencies that have been made. And it's everything from right across, things like supply chain, on-time response to our customers, delivery, and also around quality and yield. These are, real results that are printed in our, as I say, in our shareholder briefings and so on, and announced to our shareholders. So, what I wanted to show was, yes, we've been down the smart manufacturing road. We can use what we have learned internally as an organization, and we are using that to help customers to basically start on that journey and deliver on smart manufacturing. So to, I suppose, come to a real-life scenario that we're currently delivering on smart manufacturing, I picked one. I'll give another couple of case studies in a minute, but one that I wanted to kind of tie back with what we're seeing from an industry trend perspective is when we're looking at personalized medicine and the production of personalized medicine, we're seeing our producers go more and more down the road of using things like single-use technology to enable that flexibility within their manufacturing environment. Now, using single-use technology, it brings a lot of advantages to production, but it also brings a number of challenges from a manufacturing perspective. Now, some of these challenges include, physical mobility of the equipment. Some of it includes, how an operator interfaces with the equipment. So when you think of enabling a flexible manufacturing environment, the idea of having this flexibility is that all the equipment, the single-use equipment, things from, bioreactors right down to totes and so on, everything is mobile in terms of the process train. So equipment can be moved around, replugged in, and how can you do that without affecting the production? So, first of all, we look at, things like the network, what will enable, equipment to basically plug and play. So using a backbone of Ethernet IP allows manufacturers to basically, move new equipment into the process train, plug and unplug I/O, move in other equipment depending on the process runs and depending on the products that they're manufacturing. But also one of the other challenges that we see is around how an operator interfaces with this equipment. So one of the biggest risks that our manufacturers are basically putting back on Rockwell to help them achieve is, an operator on these larger systems, on these larger bioreactors, can have to make up to 900 individual connections of hoses on it, and basically, even if they get 1% of that wrong, those connections wrong, that leads to a failed batch, which obviously costs a lot of money. So how can we use Industry 4.0? How can we utilize technology to enable that and basically reduce the risk from a manufacturing perspective? So, Rockwell, in combination with PTC, who we've invested in this year, they're now a partner of Rockwell's. This was an item, a bioreactor from one of the largest OEMs in the industry, GE Healthcare, who we basically enabled, augmented reality on to help address this challenge. So on the GE bioreactor, first of all, we use augmented reality to actually layer over, using a smart device like it can be a HoloLens, it can be an iPad or an iPhone. it shows real life characteristics of what's happening in the process, so what the pH values are, what the oxygen levels are, what the CO2 levels are, but also we can determine what product is actually in a tote. So, the operator doesn't need to go back, look at the SCAD and so on. It can all be done via augmented reality. And one of the other areas that we're currently looking at and developing in combination with PTC for our customers is actually the physical connection of hoses, single-use hoses, to the bioreactor. So, what we're developing is a solution where, the operator will look through HoloLens glasses as he basically picks up a single-use hose. He's scanning the barcode on the hose, and when he looks at the bioreactor, the individual port on the bioreactor turns green, right? It enables to show him where to make those connections. Now, in the industry, that's seen as a really innovative technology because it's reducing risk. It's reducing the risk of an operator making the wrong connection at the wrong time. Just to give a couple of other case studies in terms of what we're doing. So, we're enabling augmented reality also from an operations perspective. So we're seeing more and more customers, as I said at the start of the presentation, with the workforce, leaving the industry through retirement and so on, having skilled workforce, as I say, is going to be a real challenge. So we're using things like augmented reality in terms of directing operators and maintenance people at individual machines, how they interact with those machines. They're being instructed by an SME, an expert, either from their own organization or from the OEM, in terms of how to maintain the machine, how to get it back from a fault process. Again, that's using augmented reality. We're seeing OEMs and end users using the technology from a training perspective. In terms of implementing digital twins, so a full digital twin of a process line, of a machine. How can they actually, maintain that machine prior to them ever even seeing it? They're familiar with it. They know how to get it out of fault position. So these are just some of the case studies, I suppose, we're developing for the industry to develop industry challenges. And that's it pretty much. So from a Rockwell automation perspective, from a company perspective, we're present in over 80 countries. In Ireland, we have about 250 people now, mainly engineering, based out of Cork and Dublin. But so if there's any further questions, I'll be here for a couple of hours at our stand and be delighted to talk about you in terms of any challenges that you're facing in terms of bringing smart manufacturing to life. So many thanks.